Welcome. I'm your host, Sandja Brügmann, and this is New Global Mind, where we explore leadership for systems transformation and pathways to brighter futures. Welcome, and thanks for joining us. Today's guest is Nørretranders, and he is an independent author, thinker, and speaker based in Denmark, serving an international audience. Our topic for today is exploring Sindsro. This is a Danish word for serenity and the wisdom of elders. He has involved himself in numerous activities in the public arena. His lecture tours, gathering tens of thousands of people, have been major events in the Scandinavian scene. He has published 30 plus books spanning issues from the worldview of science and the role of science in society to environmental issues and the realm of human experience and consciousness. Thor's most recent book, Alderdomsop, not yet titled in English, but loosely translated means Elders' Revolt, is about the potential role of the elderly as spearheads of a new revolt in modern times. The book advocates for serenity as a value needed for the new age. Thor, welcome to New Global Mind. It is a true pleasure to have you here with us today. I want to delve into your newest book. We'll probably draw from many of your thoughts and many of your books throughout the times of your grand career. But let's delve into your current book and look at the phenomenon you talk about, denial of change, or the shifting baseline syndrome. Maybe we start there and unfold.
Yeah, the shifting baseline syndrome is an interesting concept that actually comes from research into fishery, into counting the number of fish in the oceans. And there was a French-Canadian fishery scientist, Daniel Pauly, who in the 90s coined this phrase, shifting baseline syndrome, meaning that whenever a new generation of fishing scientists come into the field, they believe that the number of fish presently in the ocean that you can see now in the ocean when they start their professional career is the true number. And they do not have the imagination to think of the possibility that there used to be more fish than what they see now. They see what they see when they arrived to fish counting as a scientific discipline. They see that as the baseline, as the zero, as where we start. It turns out that sort of every generation has this tendency to believe that what was there when we arrived is the normal. And Pauly showed that there has been this bias, if you like, in the literature, that people are not able to imagine that there was a different time from the one they arrive at. And what we see nowadays is very much that this concept has moved from studies of fishery into many scientific disciplines because it's a very helpful concept, this idea of the shifting baseline, that people tend to adjust the zero or the baseline to what they see when they arrive, because it means that people ignore changes and ignore the fact that we have lost a lot of, for instance, biodiversity, social diversity, ability to be present in the now, ability just to be there in your life without sort of putting some task upon yourself. Many of these things we have lost over the years, but people, I mean, someone who comes into the world now, my youngest kid was born the same year as the iPhone. So it's hard for her to believe that there would have existed a world without iPhones. Mm. The smartphone and the social media become sort of what is the normal. And also the kind of interaction you have between human beings due to social media and smartphones seems to be the normal. And you're not aware of the fact that people actually use more time face-to-face and discussing things in real life, so to speak, in earlier times. And one of my points is that because we have this phenomenon of the shifting baseline syndrome, that people sort of ignore the fact that there was a world before they arrived, so to speak. And this world had qualities. It also had problems that we don't see today, but it had qualities. Because of this shifting baseline phenomenon, there's a big need now for people who can actually remember another world. And my point is, we usually think of older people like myself as people who are sort of no good use, because we're not very good at programming. We're not very good at adjusting our Wi-Fi for the television, or we are not very good at understanding the news, the technological stuff. So what use is there for old people? I've grown up where old people were seen as just, support them, give them money, give them food, give them a little assistance, but ignore them. As opposed to earlier times where older people were seen actually as clever people with wisdom. And we tend to have forgotten that, and sort of because only the new is understandable only to the young people. And so there's been this tendency to ignore older people and their experience. And what I think this concept of the shifting baseline syndrome can help us understand is that there is, in fact, a huge need for the memory of old people, because it's very basic things they can memorize, very simple things that young people have no chance of actually experiencing themselves. In the country of Denmark, where I live, it was very common when I was a kid that you would have snow in the winter, and you would have snow-covered roads and snow-covered gardens every winter. Now it's not every winter anymore. And you can have kids growing up in an urban environment where they won't really see snow a lot during childhood. You can have people growing up believing that face-to-face communication or going to a bar or something, or going to a Christmas party is not a very common thing where you meet many people because they've never experienced it. And so there's a tendency for people to not know what they're missing, which is, if you grow up without something, of course, how do you know that you miss it? How do you know that there were many more butterflies 20 years ago? You ask someone old, or the old person tells you and shows you the number of butterflies that would have been 20 years ago, and you start understanding maybe we lose something in this process of development in environmental development in our countries and in the living environment we're in. So old people are helpful to society because they can remember another world that was there just 1 or 2 generations ago. And therefore, I think it's very important to see old people as a resource, not only as a cost or an expense for society, but as something valuable. But of course, it means that old people will have to see themselves as valuable and understand that they will have to use their skills and their memory to tell society about what has been lost.
Yeah, and I think that in your new book, as you're describing various different aspects of society, is it a moral obligation of elders? Is it a choice for elders? Is it the younger generations that need to maybe value elders and understand what elders can contribute? What is the context there?
I think it is a moral obligation, yes, to not to sort of leave society. There's a tradition that when you get old enough and you leave the labor market and you don't have a job anymore, then you can basically just say, okay, goodbye. I'm now just relaxing. I go golfing or gardening or whatever, and I don't care about other people. And I think there's a moral obligation to see that there's a huge need now for older people with their life experience and maybe even wisdom, because there's a deep crisis in terms of the environment and of monotony in the social structure, and there's a need for old people. What I'm saying is we are not allowed just to retire from society. We can retire from our jobs, but we are not allowed to retire from society. And in fact, one of the most important resources now, when you look at climate, when you look at biodiversity, when you look at the problems in the social fabric of many countries now, it's obvious that we need some people to do something. And usually you would look for the youth, for the students, for the rebellions of young age, for them to change things. And what I argue is that, yes, of course, we should look there also, but there's a huge group in society now, old people, who have a lot of time, who have a lot of experience, who have a lot of memories, and also has a lot of qualifications. And they have a moral obligation to help, to step in and say, we want to do something about the environment, do something about the climate, do something about the necessity of social relations built up in society and so on. And we have the time and the resources to do so. And there's a need for us. But that, of course, also means that the younger people will have to acknowledge this need and not say, hey, you funny old man, you're just kind of a clown, but respect that we bring something to the party. And so in a sense, it's a different role for old people than what I've seen all my life. But of course, if you go back just 200 or 300 or 400 years, you would see this as the traditional way to see old people, as clever and wise and experienced people you have to listen to. So I'm trying to revive that tradition.
Reviving the wisdom of elders and the place they have in society and the fabric of life. I love it. And I think that's extraordinarily important and very meaningful for all the generations, because all that material, the understanding of connectedness, community that you speak about in your book as well, it's quite lost to modern day society.
There's another simple point of sort of simple arithmetics that I came to think of, which I think is a very powerful way of saying what you're saying also now, which is that if you look at someone my age, I just turned 70. This traditionally is the age where you retire and you sort of leave society. Basically, the structure of life has been the first 20 years you were a kid or growing up, adolescent and all that. So it's children and young people the first 20 years. And then you have 50 years of production and reproduction. You go to work, you raise your kids, you very hardworking citizen, and you do your stuff. And then traditionally, what it was like when I was a small kid, when you turn 70 and it was over. Now, if you take the horizon of life left for someone turning 70 like myself, statistically, I will live 20 years more. Maybe the average lifetime of my country is a little above 80, so you would say I would only live 10 years more, but this average lifetime includes all the people who die as young as kids, the babies, the young people, and so on. So the true life expectancy of someone turning 70 is actually 20 years. So my point is, you have 20 years as a kid and a youngster. You have 20 years in the end as someone old. And then you have 50 years in the middle that you cannot remember anything from because you were running around taking care of the kids and the job all the time. And now it's sort of a mirror image of your childhood and youth that you can enter as an old person, in the sense that you have a lot of time, you have a lot of freedom, you have a lot of also need for a meaningful activity, which is not the problem for the 50 years in the middle, but for the kid and the youngster and for the old person. The problem is, why do the world need me? Why do I need the world? All these existential questions come up again in the old age. And so my point is that we've sort of, or I have at least, tended to ignore the fact that the last 20 years are exactly as long as the first 20 years in terms of the calendar, and that why shouldn't anything happen in the last 20 years of my life? Of course, I will end like I started, needing napkins and all kind of help to get through daily routines, like a baby. The
Well,
old person needs help.
not quite yet, though. You have some years to go.
I have hopefully a lot of years to go.
20 years.
But that the 20, I mean, think of how much people learn in the first 20 years and do in the first 20 years, even though they started with a few years of napkins and stuff.
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying is, imagine what you can do in the last 20 years, even if it ends with a few years of napkins and stuff.
That meaningfulness, the meaning making of life, and the wisdom that has been accumulated throughout a life is so valuable in society today. And I want to just bring it back to the baseline syndrome, shifting baseline syndrome. You said it comes from marine biologists and the counting of fish. But why is it important that a person that's newly educated, that gets into the job market and, for example, is counting fish, and they see what's going on today as the norm, why is it important that we have the history? Why are you thinking that's specifically important?
If you think about the waters just around me, I live at a beautiful island in Denmark called Sindsro, and there's water all around me. And when we moved here, my wife and I and my family, almost 10 years ago, I went to the people down at the little harbor, a very small harbor that is in our village. And I said, can I give you a little money here? Can I give you $10 worth of money and come sometimes and find some fish that you've been catching in the ocean and buy the fish from you? Because that was very normal when I was a kid, that you would go to the harbor and you would ask the local people, can I buy some fish from you? And they just laughed at me and said, fish? That's something you get in the supermarket, because there's no fish in the ocean anymore. And most of the waters around Denmark, there are basically no fish anymore. And it's not a long time ago that there was fish here. And so now I've been living here for 8 years, and I've started sort of to accept the fact that there are no fish. I mean, okay, I know there's no fish. I'm not wondering about it anymore. But I should be wondering, why can it be that there are no fish? And there is an explanation, of course. It's because the fertilizer used in agriculture that changes the waters around Denmark in such a way that there are no fish. So, and that's a very important insight to have for society, to understand that, yes, maybe the peasants and the farmers make some kind of money from their farming, and that's a nice thing. But if they ruin the income for other groups like the fishermen, it's not so good. And we have to do something about that. So knowing that there used to be fish just one generation ago, but there are no fish anymore, is a very important knowledge. If you just arrive and say, okay, there's no fish in the sea, then you miss the point that we can change that. We can stop all this fertilizer from flowing into the ocean and changing the ecology there so that no fish can survive.
Then taking that next step, are there groups of people that are taking this knowledge and doing something about it? Or is it more an acknowledgement of something is going on in our behavior that's diminishing? Now we're talking about fish, but it's environmentally, it's in all aspects of life that we're hollowing out life from life. Is there that systemic initiative that's restating some of this, bringing life back into life? Or is that exactly what the elders are there for? Partially.
I think the elders are there to strengthen this movement, but I think it's been there. It's been there most of my adult life, actually. This part of the world, we call it the environmental movement, the energy movement, the movement for conservation of threatened species and so on, biodiversity, climate. There's a lot of people interested in that. And in my country, there's a very strong interest now in the workings of nature. People are very enthusiastic about understanding the simple experience of being present in nature and sensing the life around you. Butterflies have become a sort of a phenomenon, and everybody's interested in understanding butterflies now, which is an interesting way of understanding the richness of life and the biodiversity of life. I think that's a very true change happening now. Because there are problems, because there are challenges, people start to understand that we are in fact part of a living planet, and the ecology of the living planet is very important to our own life. And that basically all life on this planet is essential for us to live. It's not such a world where we can say we would do better without spiders, or we would do better without sort of weed or trees or something. We're dependent on all these creatures for our own survival. And I think people are beginning to learn that now. And of course, it's obvious that old people have an experience that's very, very helpful in that sense.
Knowing how things were flourishing in a better state than they are now, because they have lived it and experienced it.
Yes, and also of simply having enough life experience to have noticed nature. If you grow up in an urban environment, maybe you didn't have a chance to see nature unfolding. And then you went to school, and then you went to college, and then you went to a job and so on. And you never really had the time to see the world as it is. Maybe older people have also had more opportunities, like holidays or weekends, to do that. And so they have a richer feeling for nature. But obviously also because they have been in environment that was richer than what we see today.
And you speak of that in your book, that people are good at sensing big shifts. You know, when it's you use the example of in a dark room and you turn on the light, it's like, whoa, that's a big change. Okay, we all notice that. But the small gradual changes, not so much. And maybe speak a little bit to that.
Yeah. You turn on the light in a room that's already lit by daylight, and you don't really see the difference. Now I turn on the light here. There is a difference, but it's not very big. Had this room been dark and I turned on the light right there, it would have made a world of a difference. We have a sensory system that's adapted to see and note big changes, but not small changes. And then, of course, what happens when the environment slowly degrades, for instance, or the society slowly falls apart, and the community slowly dies out, and the connectivity in society slowly evaporates, then we don't really notice it. We don't see it on a day-to-day basis. And suddenly we have a photograph from 35 years ago, and we notice, wow, life was very different. Societal life was very different. So we are bad at sensing these small changes as they go along. It's sometimes difficult for us to understand. There was an interesting observation done by someone who is doing research into nutrition about a year ago in Denmark. She came across and then gave to the newspapers an image of a place near Copenhagen where people would go to swim. And there was a lot of people in bathing suits, and you could see that all of them were very slim. All of them had almost, by today's standard, no sort of fat on their bodies. They were fit, and that was the case for everybody. And we're talking maybe 40 years ago. And nowadays, if you took a picture from a beach today, a huge part of the group of people there would be overweight. And this is a change that has been happening slowly in society. We all notice it when it comes to ourselves. We know I'm now a little fatter than I was. I don't like that. I should worry about myself. But the true fact is that everybody changes, and everybody sort of do not notice that we all change, but more that maybe their own change they do notice. So there's something in our sensory apparatus that makes it a little difficult for us to notice small changes as they come, but that they amount to big change in the long run. And again, there having sort of the depths of time, the recollection of older times, like a photograph or an older person, is very helpful to see that, yes, there's a big change going on, actually, but slowly.
Yeah, and of course, from also the environmental perspective, some people that are maybe more astute or sensitive in that direction have spoken up about it, and certainly scientists that are focused on it have been speaking up about it. And we see, of course, it takes a long time for enough people to be aware and to care, because why would we care to change our behavior? Often that comes back to, how does it affect me? Meaning people need to either experience the pain or see the detriment to where things are heading before they change.
That's very true. And I think also we have to note how human beings behave as a group, as a society. And one of the things that I've been impressed by when looking at the human society is that the way we solve problems is not sort of gradually. It's more like suddenly we see there's a problem and then we make a big change. So it sort of slowly builds up and nobody really cares about it. And then suddenly, oops, there's a big problem. And so in a sense, I'm very optimistic, because when I look back at, like, I wrote a book in 1999. That's 26 years ago, when it happened to be so that my oldest child was 6 years old at the time. And I compared the situation in the world at that time and the agenda for the world, what are the problems people are worrying about, to the agenda of the world when I was 6 years old. And that was in 1961. In 1961, it was overpopulation. People started to worry about, and they worried about nuclear war, obviously, and they had started also to worry about pollution. Many of these problems were very different in 1999, when my kid was 6 and I was much older. Many of the problems had changed dramatically. Many people still believe that there was, for instance, a big overpopulation problem, but had not noticed that the human population actually is gradually slowing off its growth. So there was big things had changed, but it was hard to notice. You didn't really see that it had changed. Sometimes when suddenly there's a big problem, everybody acknowledges it and everybody insists on change to happen. And this has happened many times. And so human beings are slow to react, but sometimes very alert when they react. And this, of course, is a difficult message to come with present in the present time, because we have now a huge counter movement in the global public discussion over many of these issues like climate or environment, where people sort of counter react to it. And even if we made big progress in understanding environmental problems and climate problems through years, then suddenly it all evaporates, because there are strong forces in society that insist that there are no problems like climate or environment. And so we are sort of moving backwards now. But the human species is very alert and very much able to make fast movement when it understands things.
It's almost like there's a tipping point. There's some point where enough people realize that a change is needed, and it happens quite rapidly.
Very good point, yes. And I think I have been thinking for the past 10 years or so that we had reached the tipping point of the climate debate and also of the biodiversity debate. But I think the last, or even just this year, has changed my optimism about that, because it seems like we can have a tipping point and everybody can suddenly understand climate is a big problem, and then we can have a counter movement and people unlearning this learning that climate is something we have to worry about.
Yeah, and I think what also comes up is fear. It seems like there's a big contraction going on, which you also speak to in your book. And I think if I read it right, that you're encouraging people not to become too fearful. And because what happens when we're fearful, we become more contracted and we freeze up. So what's your message instead?
I think it's very obvious that many of us feel a strong fear now, and that this fear is probably overstated. We show more fear than is relevant in the situation. And one thing, of course, we should do is to take a deep breath and ask ourselves, is it really so frightening and so dangerous as we believe? Is it truly so that our world is changing in a way that is like in the 1930s, for instance, with fascism in Europe and so on? Is it the same thing happening? And is it impossible, if it is happening, to counteract it and to resist it? And I think we have a tendency to be more fearful than we have reason to be, and to be less confident of ourselves than we have reason to be, because it's so novel, it's so surprising to us that anyone could go out and say there's no climate crisis. We don't want immigrants anymore. It's so surprising to us that we don't really know what to do about it. But then we have to find sort of ourselves and our understanding of the world and say we want to insist on this. And I think one route to that is maybe the concept of serenity, of being able to not to let yourself provoke by what you are afraid of, or what shocks you get in the daily news stream, but to sort of sit down and wonder what's happening, what direction do I want to go, what can we do about this? What are the qualities of my life that I want to preserve? What are the qualities of the living system on Earth that I want to preserve? And these threats, how real are they? Because I think we are all a little paralyzed at the moment at the threats coming. And this is not just in the United States of America. This is also in many European countries. There is this very strong reaction to all that is environmental and climate and so on. So I think we have to use ourselves as instruments to sense what's happening in the world, and to feel more confident that we can do something about it.
Mm.
But we should do something about it.
And maybe that really is that role the elder can play, because they tend to be more grounded. Not always, but there's that life experience. It's like, well, we have been through many different type of challenges. We made it through. Everything is good. So that groundedness, or in Danish, Sindsro, that you speak to as well. So I kept Sindsro in the title of this podcast because there really isn't an English word for it. So maybe you could describe what Sindsro, which is a Danish word, really means, and how you're using it in your book.
Yeah, a very literal translation would be peace of mind. That's also not very precise, because what Sinnsro is about is the ability to take in whatever comes to you and let it flow through you without sort of trying to obstruct it or trying to reject it or deny it, but let it flow through and say, aha, how did I feel about that? So it's not being closed. It's not sort of going away from the world, or insisting that I will not let myself affect by what's happening in the world. It's more like saying, okay, let's see what's coming at us. Let's reflect on it with our stomachs and our hearts and our entire body. Let's discuss it with each other, and then do something about it if something needs to be done. But Sindsro is sort of it's the flow of water in a river, and not obstructing the flow of the water with a dike, but just letting it flow, letting it go. But of course, there needs to be a flow, and the flow has power. The flow has resources that we can use. But if we stop the flow, we cannot use them anymore. And so it's not denying that there is change or denying that there is challenges in the world, but it's just taking them in and letting them go again. So it's more like respiration than sort of keeping your breath and insisting that I'm very offended by what's happening or something.
Yeah. So it's almost like an acceptance of presence and being present with what is without trying to manage it or change it in the moment or pretend it, like the denial, pretend it's not there, but really a presence, a grounded presence, and to let it, like you're saying, let it flow through you. And then you talk about dialogue in community. So you think it's an important aspect of Sinnsro also to then speak with other people about what's transpiring.
Indeed. And think of a very common human experience, individual experience, which is you have someone that you have an issue with, someone that you are unhappy with. It could be someone in your close family. It could be someone in your local community. It could be someone at your work, someone at the other side of the planet that you are having an intellectual debate with, whatever. And you can sort of have a lot of worries and aggressions and bad thoughts and bad emotions and so on this person. And then when you decide to sit down and tell this person, I have an issue with you. I'm unhappy that you are doing this or saying that or whatever. It all evaporates. Usually it just goes away because, oh, yes, I understand now that I was offending you or that I was taking your resources. I was doing something you didn't want me to do. And it's not a big deal for me to change my behavior. So it's often very, very simple. Just sit down and let it go, exchange, show your emotions, show your sort of ideas to the other person and see what happens. And very often the other person will change, or you yourself, you see, okay, I have to change here. I was the idiot here. And so Sinnsro is also very much about, instead of having all these internal fightings in your mind, just do things, make them flow and see what happens. And then you feel immense Sinnsro after that. And I think on the societal level, it's the same thing. If you insist on changing things, you're already halfway through living better life with these problems that you want to solve. Because instead of just saying, there are these idiots who do silly things to society, try to have a dialogue with them and you see things changing.
So that's quite a skill. I think not that many people are actually able to. It's conflict resolution skills are really, sitting down with the opponent, so to speak, but being able to sit together and have that. Okay, we have to let down the wall a little bit, the defenses a little bit, and actually speak about what each of us are experiencing to figure out what is that commonality, what's the common space. So yeah, elders would probably have had more experience delving into those types of conversations and realizing that oftentimes there can be a positive outcome.
Yes, and it's also not sort of insisting that it's always the other guy that's the problem. It made a great impression on me many years ago when there was a guy from Hawaii called Hugh Lin who founded a spiritual movement in Hawaii. I haven't dealt much with it since then, but it made a great impression on me. It's called Ho'oponopono. Ho'oponopono, it's called. And it's sort of a spiritual tradition, which is based on Hugh Lin's observation that you're responsible for everything you experience. So also the bad things that are done to you is something you're responsible for experiencing. It's not that you're responsible for doing them, but you actually experience it. So if you take your whole experience of the world with all the nasty people out there and you say, I'm sorry, I had this experience. I saw you as a bad person. I'm sorry. Please excuse me. I shouldn't have thought that way of you. This is a very interesting little thing to try to do, even if you're not a Ho'oponopono person, that to think of everything that happens to me is actually something that I'm responsible for. Actually, I'm the one experiencing all this bad stuff. And I remember when Dr. Len visited my place I lived when he came many years ago, I pointed out the window and I could show him a nuclear power plant in the neighboring country of Sweden that I could see from my home. And I said, people are very worried about that. People are very worried that it will be an accident and that would be radioactive pollution and people will get cancer and die. That's a very bad thing. Would you really claim that I was responsible for that problem? Isn't that the plant over there that's responsible for my emotions? And he said, no, you're responsible for being afraid of that nuclear power plant. You are responsible for sensing the problems that it could inflict on you. You're responsible for that. That doesn't mean that you cannot change it or that it's not real, but it just means that you are the one experiencing that. And you're responsible for having that experience. It's a little tricky for the Western mind to think this way, but I think it's also extremely helpful to try to think of all the problems I have in my life, all the people I don't like in my life, all the annoying people in my life. If I start to think of it not as something that other people are doing to me, but that somehow I'm part of this. Somehow I'm part of why this person is annoying to me, why this person is ruining my society. I'm part of it in some sense. I'm experiencing it and I'm responsible for that experience and I'm part of that process. I'm part of that game. I should try to do something. I should not say, here's the idiot or she is the idiot. I should say, what can we do about this? And that's very difficult. And you have to relearn that skill almost every day because it's difficult. It's difficult to keep up that stance.
Yeah, and it definitely requires that we have to be in a state of thriving, because the second we're a little bit stressed or drained, that's much harder to go that route. In your book, in the chapter Light and Life, you say, so yes, other people can keep you alive, but it's also those same people who can take life away from you. Do you remember?
Yeah, that's from a little speech I was asked to give, I think, from here at this island of Sindsro, which is a remote and beautiful place in Denmark, where people, once they moved here, they don't move away again. So people get old and they die, and there's a big part of the population that's old people. And of course, somebody's spouse die, somebody's neighbor die, somebody's colleague die. So people tend to get more and more isolated with time because their networks goes away. And so the local municipality here, the local kommune, they made a very nice initiative saying, we want to arrange meals for these people to meet each other so they can find new friends. If they lost their spouse, they lost their neighbor, they can come here and have. And so they asked me to give a talk about what is it a good idea to have new friends if your old friends die. And I told them that there's a lot of studies done on health and how long a lifetime and stuff like that, done in the United States, basically, that shows that the more you have good social relations, you have connections in your life, the healthier you are and the longer you live. So it's not a question of the flu virus or stuff like that, or how much exercise you do, or if you never say something you shouldn't have said or something. That doesn't influence your lifetime so much as the fact that if you have good connections, good relations with other people, you tend to live longer and you also tend to have a more healthy life. So it's a good recipe for a good life and a long life to have social relationships. You don't have to have very many, but you have to have some. And you have to cherish them and to nourish them. And so I told this to this group of people who were even older than myself. And I looked in their eyes when I was talking about this, and I saw this desperation in their eyes, telling me that what they were thinking was, yes, okay, other people is what can keep me alive. If there are other people in my life, I can stay longer in my life. But other people is also the problem, the nuisance, the thing I don't like in my life. That is, in fact, what's killing me. Because many old people feel even more reserved and sort of frightened by other people than younger people do. So the dilemma, the problem, the conflict that I saw in the eyes of these people was, okay, this guy is telling us if we want to live long time, we have to relate to other human beings. But I know that what takes my life away, what kills me, is other people. because other people are annoying. They say silly things and they make noise and they do weird stuff. So there's this conflict. I need other people to survive, but other people are killing me. So what do I do about that? Everybody knows the same problem with kids, for instance. Kids are the most wonderful thing in life, but they're also the most annoying thing in life. And we have to live with this double-edged situation of kids. And it's the same with other human beings. They are enriching to our life, but they're also very annoying. So how can you ever live a life that will be long enough? Because you have to relate to other people, but that's what's killing you. And so my advice was, don't ever try to relate to other people just because you want to relate to them or because you want to live a long life, because that's not going to work for you. Connect with other people because you want to play golf, or you want to save the planet, or you want to play cards, or you want to make wonderful Chinese food to each other, or you want to make crossword puzzles or do something. Have something you do together with other people, and preferably even a task. You want to save this little area behind our village that nobody takes care of. You want to do that together, and you make people help you, and you help other people, and you have a relationship. Because other people are very annoying, and the older you get, you learn that fact more and more to your heart. Other people are very annoying, but if you have some task you want to do or something you want to do together with them, then you forget that they're annoying. There's a tendency to be very romantic. Everybody's talking very much about community these days. And I've been writing a book 15 years ago about community and the role of and importance of the community, together with another guy here on Sindsro who created this island that's world famous for being self-sufficient with renewable energy. And this guy was the driving dynamo behind that. And we wanted to make a book about community and the role of community in this energy revolution that happened on this island. And our starting point was to say, don't be romantic when you talk community, because many people talk about community as something, oh, it's so nice and oh, it's so good to be part of a community. And that's not true. Communities are very irritating and very offensive to you, and you don't always like what's happening in your community. So if it's just that you meet every Thursday night to discuss community and to make the decisions about who's going to do what in this community, you get tired of it very, very quickly because it's annoying. But if you have a task that you want to do together, you want to use the commons like the wind energy or the culture or the little playground for children, or you want to do something together that doesn't belong to anyone, but is the commons that belongs to everyone, then it's not annoying to be with other people because there's a meaning to it, there's a purpose to it, there's a task you set. My general advice is don't be romantic and believe that communities or other people or kids, for that matter, are just so nice all the time, because they're not. But remember that kids is your true biological task, something you have to take care of. Local community commons like a playground or the language or culture, that's something you do together, and then you like the people you're in a community with because you do something with them.
Because there's something you're doing, you're creating something together so that you come together around that task,
Yes.
so to speak, that common shared task. So wonderful. I think that's a very strong point and easier to overcome or allow the annoyances that all of us as human beings create for each other when the focus is not on that, but the focus is on, okay, we're here for a common shared purpose, and that's what we're going for.
Yeah, ignore the friction. And the only way you can ignore the friction is by doing something of importance.
Yeah, that is a wonderful piece of advice from an elder. Wonderful wisdom. Love it. I wanted to delve into market economy and gift economy. What is the market economy and the gift economy and how it plays out as you see it?
What I was taught in school and at university is that we live in a market economy. And the money and jobs and all that is the important thing, part of our society. There's a market, and then there's a state that makes the legislation and laws and all that, and police and enforcement of laws and so on. And so our society is a market society with a strong, at least in Denmark, a strong element of state regulation of the market. But then if you start looking at your own life or the life of everyone else you know, it's obvious that what really means something in our life is not the market economy and is not the state. It's what is sometimes called the civil society, or the things that are not commodities that you sell and buy, not wages that you pay someone to work for you, but are little things we do for each other without any payment, without any law enforcement, but just do in our civil life between people. And these are very small things, like just waving a hand when you meet someone, or opening a door for someone who is trying to carry something clumsy through that door. Giving a little hand of help to a neighbor who needs that help, or asking how are you doing to someone who is obviously not doing very fine that day. Just the small gifts that we give each other, the small things we give without taking any payment for them, or without any law saying you have to care about your neighbor. But these small gifts are, in fact, what dominates our everyday life. And what makes me in a good mood or in a bad mood that day is whether or not somebody smiled to me at the beginning of the day. Or if I live in an urban environment, I come across a lot of people on my way to work, for instance. Did they smile and seem friendly, or did they just look angry and grim when I came? And I think these small acts of gift giving, where you don't expect payment or anything, and you're not regulated by law, these are, in fact, what's most important to us in our daily life. It's very obvious if you have kids, or if you have a dog, something like that, that your relationship with other people has nothing to do with the market. It has something to do with meeting other people and sharing the existence with them. And so the point is that the most important part of our society is actually the gift economy of people helping people, smiling and then helping again, and you start having a relationship to your neighbor because you build up all these small exchanges. And this gift economy is, in fact, as important as the market economy, even if you take it in terms of um, how much of what humans produce, our production of stuff, is in fact ending up as commodities in the market, and how much is just given as gifts. And it turns out there's some big studies leading to this conclusion that half of what we produce, for instance, meals in our household, we do not charge money for. We just give them to members of our family or guests coming in our house. And the other half of what we do is something that we sell for money, like our labor or the products we can produce. So gift economy is very important in our life, and we tend to ignore this and believe that the market is running our society, and it is in fact not. Much of the joy of life comes from gifts, not from commodities. And somehow it seems that we are all now obsessed with commodities instead of with gifts.
Industrialization has made things cheaper to buy but harder to keep, I think, is another interesting way of modern society and market economy.
It's a weird fact that shoes are pretty cheap to buy these days. A boot doesn't cost as much as it did a few hundred years ago. But there's a big difference between a boot 100 years ago and a boot today, in that anyone who could make a boot 100 years ago could make the whole process of producing a boot, from the skin of the animal and whatever you needed. Shoemaker could make a boot or a shoe to you. When there was a problem with that shoe or that boot, you could go to the shoemaker and say, can you repair it for me? And he could say yes, because he had basically done the whole thing. He knew how to do it. And so took a lot of money to buy it, but then you could repair it and you could have it for many years. Nowadays, boots and shoes are produced in an industrial fashion, where you have this production lines and you have a division of labor. Maybe the sole of the shoe is made in one continent, and the top layer of the shoe is made in another continent, and the laces are made in a third continent, and they are brought together and coupled up to be a shoe, which means that no shoe you can buy today is the work of one person. It's always the work of many people being on different cities or different continents. So there's no single person who can repair this shoe from the basic. So it's cheap to buy a shoe, but it's almost impossible to keep it alive, so to speak, to repair it and to develop it through your life. So it's something you buy and then you throw away. And this is, unfortunately, what industrialization has taught us, to make things very cheap for us to buy and then easy for us to throw away. And that, of course, is bad for ourselves because a good pair of boots is part of your identity. And a new pair of boots take a long time to get used to and to make part of your identity. But also because it's bad for the environment that we throw out the materials and cannot recycle and reuse them and keep them alive. So there's a loss of quality of life in the industrial process.
And from a resource perspective, that is not very good for how the world is going at this stage. But I think it also, for me, I also send some of that gifting economy that we just spoke about because, maybe my neighbor can repair my shoes, or maybe this other neighbor over here could help me make fig jams from the figs in my tree, meaning it's just a resource used in a different way when we have community. Maybe I have some skills that other people in my community that I could then contribute, so this communal gifting or giving space that also taps into the market economy in terms of sustaining products for longer, so the life cycle use is much longer, and it becomes harder when products are built from cheap materials or put together in such a way that it's almost impossible to extend the life of that product. So I think that's such an important discussion point, but also in terms of how community is created or can be created and sustained.
Indeed, and the fact that you need other people to help you, like in the examples you give here, other people can help you repair your clothing. Other people can help you with the plants in your garden or whatever. And you have a reason to make exchange for them in the sense of they help you, you help them, exchange of gifts, not of money, but gifts. And it's an old tradition, 100-year-old tradition in the science of anthropology to say that gift giving actually builds societies. Because if I give you a gift, you don't pay me anything. And there's this subtle understanding that maybe you give me something back sometime, not the same thing, not of the same value, whatever that is, but I've helped you with your garden. Maybe you help me with my coat that needs a little sewing one day. So gift giving builds societies because it builds relationships. It's not ending. It doesn't stop in time. If you compare that to commodity, to market, if I sell you something, you give me the money that I ask for the product, and then we're done. You don't owe me anything. I don't owe you anything because you got my product, I got your money, and it's over. So a market transaction is always over when it's done. There can be insurance or something, but basically it's over when it's over, while a gift-giving exchange is not over when it's over because you don't pay me anything, but there's this subtle understanding that maybe you will help me another day. So it builds relationships where commodities do not build relationships. And that's very obvious when you move, like I did almost 10 years ago, from a very urban environment where I lived most of my life to a small, more rural environment here at Sindsro in Denmark, where there are not so many people. And you learn this weird fact that there are no more people than there are. And you have to be serious about other people because you cannot just exchange them with other people like you can in the urban environment. You can say, if people in this house are stupid, I just go to that house instead, and there are nice people here. You could do that in the big city because you can always exchange things. If you don't always change people over, if you don't like your baker, take another baker. If you don't like your neighbor, take another neighbor. But if you're in a small community, there's only one baker and there's only one neighbor, and you have to deal with them. You cannot just sort of throw them away. So you learn that it's a deep relationship you get, and there's a deep need to have a social relationship with other people because that's the way you can have your shoes repaired or have new plants for your garden, and you cannot just turn away from people. And that's a very humbling and also very useful experience to have, that you need actually other people and you have to treat them in a fair way because you need them, and they're not expendable in the way that people are in an urban environment. So that helps. And I think gift economy is a way of learning about the necessity of other people as opposed to the market economy, the exchange of commodities and money, which is basically anonymous. You just buy things and there's no more to that.
So it's relationship learning skills that we have touched on a couple of times, the community building skills, the interpersonal skills, the conflict resolution skills. And in general, do you think that the younger generation is not growing up learning those skills in the same way, or does that come with age and experience?
I see a lot of extremely talented and gifted and wonderful young people around me and kids. I see kids playing games for fun, but which are really sort of exercising the skills you're talking about. If you watch kids playing, they're basically training themselves in the kind of stuff you're talking about, the skills you're talking about. So I think there's a huge hope in kids, and I think that they will learn a lot all by themselves. We don't have to interfere so much. We don't have to be so worrying. We don't have to worry so much about them learning to write or read or do math in the same way that we used to have, because we have all these technologies to help us with that now. But kids are very good at learning social relations, yes. They've also been suppressed in learning it very much by the school system, the university system, the urban environment, and so on. And so they tend also to unlearn this stuff. And it's important for everyone to learn about it. And I think older people maybe become a little more relaxed and sort of rediscover the values that they were obvious to them when they were kids. Treat other people nice and they treat you nice. And that's basically what it's all about.
Yeah, it should be doable, seems pretty straightforward. I don't know why it's so hard in this world.
And that's
There was one word that stood out to me that I think we do need to have in our conversation here.
Renaissance. It's not my word. It's a pun, of course, playing on Renaissance, the rebirth, and gray as a metaphor for the old guys, the old people, the old men and women. So the Renaissance is that old people are sort of having a renaissance now. And instead of just ignoring them and forgetting them, they trend now to blossom up as a kind of a resource in society, and to be more outwardish, to be more taking more part in society than they did a few decades ago, this group of people. So the Renaissance is about old people coming back and taking part in society, and that's a nice idea. I'm not sure the word Renaissance is very helpful. Old people are coming back. Old age is becoming a force in society, and it's old people need to be here. There's a deep biological wisdom to the existence of old people. Not many animal species actually have individuals that survive their ability to reproduce. That is, most animals will die when they cannot reproduce. They're just too old. Nature doesn't need them anymore, and they just die. In human beings, we have a life after the ability to reproduce, most market and clear for women, but also for men. There's an end to the reproductive capabilities, and yet you live on. And what's the point in that? The point in that is that human beings have a very fantastic ability to learn when they're infants, when they're small kids. No animal's offspring can create such an enormous learning skill and ability as human infants. But they do this at a price that they're not very good at taking care of themselves. So they need some adults around to take care of them, to feed them, and to make them stay alive. And so we need people to take care of these extremely learning able, but also not able to take care of themselves, little infants. And so we need people to do that. So it would be a very bad sort of investment in economy terms for a woman to get a child at her very last years of life, because then she couldn't help bringing up this kid. And the same goes for a man. As humans, you cannot allow yourself to have kids until the end of your life, because kids need like 10 or 20 years of help to get into life in a good way. The biology of human beings is such that we need older people who cannot reproduce themselves to help the kids grow up. It's not an accident, or it's not just for fun that old people exist. It's a biological necessity for Homo sapiens that there are old people around.
What I think might be interesting to bring in here is the Chula Hop experiences. So what can you tell us about that?
Chula Hop is a word that comes from Astrid Lindgren's wonderful character, Pippi Longstocking, with a children's book from just after World War II that became a TV series when I was a youngster, and very popular. There's this song in this TV series where she's singing, here I come, Pippi Longstomping, Chula Hop, Chula Hesasa. So it's sort of a phrase she uses as an expression of the joy of life. Chula Hop means sort of, it's fun. I'm dancing. I'm happy. And I use this phrase Chula Hop as a description of the Chula Hop moments, which is something that Barbara Fredrickson, an American psychologist, has been studying for like 20 or 25 years. These small micro moments, she called them, and I call them Chula Hop moments, but it's basically the same. The micro moment or Chula Hop moment is when two people interact in a way that shows up in the physiology of both of them. Like if you meet someone in the street and you smile and you give maybe even give a hug, but just smile and help another person sort of with opening the door or doing something, a little small thing, and you just exchange this little smile. Don't have to know people beforehand. You exchange this little smile. You have a micro moment, says Fredrickson. You have this little moment where you feel a little joy, and you can also show on the heart rate, on the blood hormones and whatever, that there's a little change there. And we all know that you have this little feeling of Chula Hop or happiness. There's a little interaction with the other person on the sidewalk. And Fredrickson has this beautiful idea then that when you accumulate micro moments with people, you also accumulate a relationship with them. Like, the more times you've greeted a neighbor, good morning, the more relationship do you have to that neighbor, the more bond you have to that neighbor. The more you give a warm smile and a hug to members of your family, the stronger you feel the bond to them. So you accumulate micro moments or Chula Hop moments to sort of good neighborhood relationships or friendships. Or if you do it enough, it ends up as love. So love, in Fredrickson's definition, is really just accumulated micro moments, because you've been living together in a family or in a relationship for so many years. You've exchanged so many small smiles and little good things in daily life that you feel this strong bond that is not just a friendship, but is love. And so that's where it all comes from, basically. It's not saying yes in a church or something that really defines love. It helps in some aspects, but it's more like many, many small interactions that will make you happier and feel strong bonds to each other. And so you could say that the whole of society, in particular the civil society, where we interact without any monies or laws involved, but just as civilians exchanging little smiles in everyday life, that is really the important part of our life. That's what means something to our mood. And it's also what builds bonds and builds friendships and even love between us.
I think that's a beautiful concluding message on our talk here today. Tor, thank you so much for taking the time to be on New Global Mind with me. I really appreciate it. And it's wonderful that you're bringing the movement of elders into society in this way.
Thank you. And thank you for paying attention and for inviting me here. It's been great fun.
Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Sandja Brügmann. You have been listening to New Global Mind, Leadership for Systems Transformation. You can follow us on Spotify, YouTube, and all your usual podcast channels, and on our website, thepassioninstitute.com. See you next time.